Andre Washington was 41 years old, and until that October night, he believed his only real mistake was working too hard to notice his marriage falling apart. He was a master electrician, calloused hands, a work truck, a contracting business he'd built from nothing. Modest by some standards, but honest by every measure that mattered to him. His wife Patrice was polished, ambitious, and beautiful. And when she sat across from him that evening with a glass of wine and no tears, telling him she wanted a divorce, something in her composure made him go very still. She took the house, the accounts, everything he had spent 12 years building with his hands, and his silence, and his loyalty. And Patrice walked away, believing she had left him with nothing. Because to her, a quiet man with a work truck and calloused hands had nothing worth counting. She was still living in that belief 2 years later, when a jet touched down on an Atlanta airfield, and Andre Washington descended the steps, suit pressed, expression easy, a stunning woman composed and unbothered walking beside him. Patrice was standing on that same tarmac. She saw him before he saw her. The color drained from her face. Her knees buckled. She went down. What happened in those 2 years, and what was still coming for everyone who underestimated Andre Washington, neither of them saw it coming. Before we jump into the story, comment where in the world you are watching from and subscribe, because tomorrow's story is one you need to hear. The address number on the mailbox was crooked. Andre noticed it the second his headlights swept across it. He had already cut the engine and stepped out of the truck before he made the conscious decision to fix it. That was just how his hands worked. They found crooked things and straightened them. 12 years of that same instinct had built the house standing behind that mailbox. Every beam plumb, every joint clean, every wire run with purpose. He pressed the number flat with his thumb and stepped back. Better. The truck bed behind him held his tools the way a library holds books. Organized, categorized, nothing wasted. His drill case sat flush against the left rail. His wire strippers were coiled in their pouch. A protein bar wrapper from lunch was folded into a neat square, tucked into his jacket pocket until he found a trash can. Andre Washington did not leave messes. Not at job sites, not in his truck, not anywhere. The house was quiet in a way that felt wrong, not silent. The heat kicked on. The refrigerator hummed, but there was no television, no music, no sound of Patrice moving between rooms, just a kind of held-breath stillness that settled against the walls like smoke. She was in the living room, dressed, not in loungewear, not in the comfortable things she wore after work, but dressed. A silk blouse the color of burgundy, her hair set, gold studs in her ears. A glass of red wine resting between 2 fingers, like a prop she had chosen carefully. She was sitting in the chair near the window, not on the couch, and when Andre walked in, she looked up at him with the composed, soft expression of someone who had practiced this exact moment more than once. "Can you sit down?" she said. He sat. "I want a divorce." No tears, no trembling chin, just the words, delivered like a presentation she had prepared and was now executing on schedule. He watched her face for something involuntary, a flicker, a catch in the breath, and found nothing. She had sealed every seam. Andre looked at her, and in the silence that followed her words, 12 years moved through him like a current. He remembered the early version of them, her laughing across a folding table in the half-finished kitchen of this very house, passing him sandwiches while he ran conduit through the walls on a Saturday. He remembered when she would tell people, with genuine pride, "My husband built this house." He remembered the year her ambitions shifted, quietly at first, and then not quietly at all, when the invitations from certain circles started coming, and she began to look at him differently, not with contempt, with something more surgical than contempt. Assessment, the way a person looks at a piece of furniture, and begins calculating whether it belongs in the new room. He had noticed. He had said nothing. That was his way. "Okay," he said. Something moved across her face. It was brief, almost imperceptible. But it was there. She had expected something other than okay. An argument. A plea. She had prepared for negotiation and found nothing to negotiate against. The wineglass shifted in her fingers. "I think we can do this the right way," she said. "Amicably. There's no reason for this to be messy." Andre looked at her for a moment. Then he asked the only question that was in him. "How long have you been planning this?" 1 beat. 2. The pause was small, less than 3 seconds. But to a man who spent his days reading current flow and identifying resistance in systems, it was unmistakable. A wire carrying more load than it was supposed to. "I've been unhappy for a while," she said. "That's all." He nodded slowly. He did not push. He did not ask again. They talked for another hour. She used the word amicable 3 more times. She told him he could keep the truck and his tools. She would take the house and the joint accounts. She said this was fair. She said it without blinking. He agreed to the divorce. He did not argue. He did not beg. He went upstairs, showered, and when he came back down, she had already moved her wineglass to the bedroom and closed the door. He waited 2 hours before he opened the filing cabinet. He needed his passport. That was the reason. A job bid, out of state, end of next week. His hands moved through the hanging folders by feel until they found it. He pulled it out. He started to close the drawer. The folder behind it was manila, slightly thicker than the others, with no label on the tab. He stood there in the low light of the hallway and opened it. Bank statements, 37 pages of them. An account in Patrice's name alone, opened 3 years and 4 months ago. He read the balance on the most recent statement twice. $214,000. He pulled out his phone. He photographed every page. He replaced the folder exactly as he had found it. Same angle, same depth in the drawer. He closed the cabinet. He went to bed. He lay in the dark beside his sleeping wife and did not move. His eyes were open. Andre was up at 5. He did not set an alarm. He never needed one. His body understood work the way some people understood sleep, naturally, without resistance. He moved through the dark house in quiet socks, started the coffee, and sat down at the kitchen table while the machine gurgled and hissed behind him. He put his phone flat on the table and opened the photographs. 37 pages. He went through them slowly, the way he read a wiring diagram, not looking for one thing, but tracking everything. The account had been opened in March, 3 years ago. The early deposits were small. 400 here, 800 there. The kind of amounts that wouldn't register as unusual even if someone were paying attention. But Andre had not been paying. He had been working. 6 days a week, out the door before 7, home after dark, handing the household finances to Patrice because she had asked to manage them, and he had trusted her the way you trust a load-bearing wall, completely, and without checking it every day. He should have checked it. The deposits grew over time. By the second year, they were running $3,000 and $4,000 a month. By the third year, some of them were 5 figures. The balance climbed the way a slow flood climbs. Steadily, without drama, until the waterline was somewhere you never intended it to reach. $214,000. He memorized the account number. He memorized the routing number. He memorized the dates of the 5 largest deposits and cross-referenced them in his head against the months he could remember. The months the business had been good. The months they'd landed big contracts. Then he closed the photographs, set the phone face down on the table, and drank his coffee. Patrice did not come downstairs until nearly 8. He went to work both days, like nothing had changed. At job sites, he was the same man he had always been. Measuring twice, cutting once, telling his crew what he needed without raising his voice and watching them deliver it. Nobody noticed anything different about it. That was the thing about being a quiet man. People couldn't tell the difference between your good quiet and your dangerous quiet. With Patrice, he was steady. He answered questions when she asked them. He passed her the salt at dinner. He let her talk about the logistics of separating their lives as though they were planning a move to a new neighborhood. Practical, low temperature, simple. She seemed comfortable with his composure. She had mistaken it for acceptance. On the second evening after dinner, he stepped outside and called Walter Knox. Walter picked up on the second ring. His voice was unhurried. It was always unhurried. "Andre." "Walter." He stood on the back porch, looking out at the yard he had graded and seeded himself, the fence line he had set in concrete. "I need something from you. I need the name of the best divorce attorney you've ever personally watched win." "Not heard about." "Watched?" A pause. Not because Walter needed to think, but because Walter was the kind of man who let the full weight of a moment exist before he responded to it. "Everything okay?" "No," Andre said, "but I'll handle it." Another pause. Then, "Her name is Patricia Odom. Downtown office. She doesn't lose because she doesn't take cases she isn't already ahead of." He paused again. "Don't talk to anyone else first." "I won't," Andre said. "Thank you, Walter." He went back inside and washed the dinner dishes. Patricia Odom's office was on the 14th floor of a building that smelled like recirculated air and old decisions. Her desk was clean. She was small, dark-suited, and she had eyes that moved over documents the way a scanner moves, fast and thorough and missing nothing. Andre brought the photographs, all 37 pages, printed at the copy shop on his way over. She looked at them without comment for 11 minutes. He watched the clock on the wall and did not fill the silence. Then she set the papers down and folded her hands on the desk. "I'm going to need full financial disclosure," she said. "Personal and business. Every account you hold jointly. Every account in your name alone. Every account you have signatory access to." He told her about the business accounts. He told her that Patrice had been listed as co-signatory for administrative purposes. Invoices, the occasional payroll matter, for years, because it had seemed practical, and he had trusted her. Patricia Odom pulled the business account statements he had included in the packet. She went quiet again. Her eyes moved. Her pen made 2 marks. She picked up her phone and called someone. She said 3 sentences and hung up. Then she turned her monitor toward him. An LLC registration. State of Georgia. Registered agent listed at the top. Devereaux Holloway. Andre read the name. He read the company name. He read the registration date. Then he looked at the vendor payment records his attorney pulled up beside it. 4 years of payments from his business accounts to an LLC he had never heard of, for services he had never received, totaling just over $340,000. He sat with it. He did not raise his voice. He did not move. He looked at Patricia Odom and asked the only question that mattered. "What are my options?" She opened a legal pad, clicked her pen, and began. The courthouse smelled like floor wax and fluorescent lights. Andre had been inside it twice before in his life. Once for a permit dispute on a commercial job. Once to renew a business license. Both times he had walked out the same way he walked in. Unhurried, unbothered, with everything he came for. He arrived at 8:45. The hearing was at 9:30. He sat in the hallway on a wooden bench and read the documents in his folder one more time, not because he needed to, but because he was a man who believed in knowing every wire in the wall before the power came on. His suit was charcoal gray. He had pressed it himself the night before. Patrice arrived at 9:10. She came through the glass doors with Dev beside her and 2 attorneys behind them, all 4 moving with the coordinated ease of people who had rehearsed their entrance. Patrice wore a cream blazer and had her hair pulled back the way she wore it when she wanted to appear reasonable. She looked composed and prepared and faintly sorrowful in a way that was clearly calculated to read as dignity. Dev had on a navy suit, and the expression of a man who was confident in the architecture he'd built. His eyes found Andrei on the bench and held for exactly 1 second, the look of a man checking on something he believed was already settled, and then moved on. Andrei watched them pass. He said nothing. He returned to his documents. Patricia Odom had been right about the shape of it. The house was titled in Patrice's name. Andrei had arranged that himself 8 years ago, when a contractor he knew got sued and lost his personal property in the judgment. He'd moved the house title as a shield. It had been sensible. It had been correct. And now it was the blade Patrice's attorneys used most efficiently, producing the deed with the practiced calm of people who knew it was the strongest card in their hand. The joint accounts were nearly empty. The statements showed the balances clearly. His attorney objected to the rate of withdrawal in the preceding months. Dev's coached response was ready. Household expenses, home improvements, routine management of marital assets. Every dollar had a receipt attached. The receipts were real. The invoices behind them were not all real, but they looked real, and that distinction would take months of forensic work to establish. The LLC transactions were layered. 3 shell companies, deep dormant business names, vendor service categories broad enough to cover almost anything. Patricia Odom had told him going in, "This part takes time we don't have today. Today we take what's survivable, and we come back for the rest." Andrei had listened. He had understood. He signed the settlement at 11:47 in the morning. He walked out of the courthouse with his truck, his tools, and $12,000 sitting in a personal savings account that Patrice had never thought to look for, because she had never thought there was anything to look for. He had opened it 6 years ago to cover equipment. His name only, a separate bank, a different branch. He had simply never mentioned it. It was not enough to feel good about. He knew that. He did not try to make it feel like more than it was. He drove back to the apartment he'd been renting month to month for 3 weeks. He changed out of the suit. He made a sandwich. He sat by the window and ate it, and watched the street below move through its ordinary afternoon. Cars. A woman walking a dog. 2 kids on bikes. To anyone watching, he looked like a man who had just lost everything. 2 years passed. The airfield sat about 20 minutes outside Atlanta, flat and quiet, with a small private terminal that smelled like jet fuel and strong coffee. It was a Wednesday. The sky was pale blue and cloudless, the kind of morning that made everything look exact. The Cessna Citation taxied in at 11:15. Andrei came down the steps first. His suit was charcoal and fine, the fabric heavy and unassailable, the kind of thing that didn't need announcing because it announced itself. He moved without hurry. He always moved without hurry. Camille came down behind him, one hand briefly touching the railing, unhurried and composed and completely present. She wore a dark coat and carried nothing she didn't need. She was the kind of beautiful that didn't perform itself for anyone. Across the tarmac, maybe 40 yards out, Patrice Holloway stood with her brother beside a black SUV, waiting for a man in a gray coat who had to be the investor Dev had been nursing for the better part of 3 months. She saw Andrei first. He watched it happen from across the distance, watched the moment her eyes found his face, and her brain fell behind her body. The color moved out of her, the way heat moves out of a room when a window opens, fast and all at once. Her chin dropped, her knees went, and she went with them. No theater to it, just physics. She hit the ground, and the investor in the gray coat moved toward her, and Dev stood frozen with an expression that was ash and calculation in equal parts. Andrei looked at Camille. "There they are," he said. She nodded once. He turned and looked at Dev across the tarmac. He held Dev's eyes for 3 seconds, still, quiet, everything and nothing in that look. Then he walked toward the terminal. They had a meeting to get to. The storage unit was on Fairburn Road, 3rd row from the back, Unit 114. It was 10 feet wide and 12 feet deep. Andrei had lined one wall with plastic shelving. the kind sold in flat boxes at hardware stores. His tools sat on the lower shelves in the order he used them. His clothes hung from a rod he had installed himself, using lag screws and a piece of pine dowel he cut to length in about 4 minutes. A folding table sat near the door, a single plastic chair. He had made it functional the same day he rented it. That was all he needed it to be. It was a Thursday, 8 days after the courthouse, a little after noon. He sat in the truck with the engine off and the windows cracked, eating a protein bar and reading a contract document for a residential rewire job he'd bid before any of this started. $4,200, 3-day job. It was not a large thing. It was a real thing, and he was going to do it. His phone buzzed on the center console. Walter Knox. Andre answered on the second ring. "You eating?" Walter said. "Yeah." "Good. Finish first." Andre chewed, swallowed, folded the wrapper into a tight square and set it in the cup holder. "I'm done." "All right." Walter paused, not the pause of a man gathering courage, but the pause of a man who had been carrying something for a while, and was choosing his first word carefully. "There's something I need to tell you that I probably should have told you before the proceedings. I didn't, because the timing wasn't right, and because I didn't want it anywhere near what those attorneys were doing. You understand?" "Keep talking," Andre said. What Walter told him took about 12 minutes. Andre did not interrupt. He sat with his hand resting on the steering wheel, watching a sparrow land on the chain-link fence at the far end of the storage lot, peck at something, and fly off. 2 years ago, before Patrice had filed, before Andre had found the folder, before any of it, Walter Knox had begun the process of converting 30 years of informal mentorship into something structural. He had formed an LLC, Knox Washington Infrastructure Partners, filed in the state of Georgia, registered to a separate attorney, funded through an investment account that had never touched anything connected to Andre's household finances. Andre's name was on it as operating partner. His signature, obtained over dinner one evening, on documents Walter had described as preliminary partnership paperwork, nothing urgent, was already on file. Andre remembered that dinner, a year and a half ago, Ruth's Chris on Peachtree. Walter had pushed an envelope across the table and said, "Just some housekeeping," and Andre had signed without studying it the way he should have, which was not like him. But it was Walter. He had signed because it was Walter. "I didn't tell you what it was," Walter said now. "I want you to know that was intentional. If you'd known, it might have come up in disclosure. Might have been something her people could have touched. I needed it clean, and I needed it quiet, and I needed it in your name only." Andre looked out the windshield. The storage lot was still. A cloud moved across the sun, and the shadow passed over the concrete and kept going. "What's in it?" Andre said. Walter told him. The LLC had secured a regional electrical contracting bid on a multi-site commercial development project. 5 buildings across 2 counties, new construction, full electrical from foundation to panel. The contract had been awarded 3 weeks ago. The project manager had been holding for Walter's confirmation on the operating partner before issuing the first work order. Contract value, $2.1 million over 18 months. Andre sat with that number the way he sat with most things, without rushing past it, without letting it lift him off the ground. He let it be real. He let it be what it was. "You could have led with that," he said. Walter laughed. It was a low, dry sound. "I needed you to hear the structure first. The money doesn't mean anything without the structure. When do they need an answer? They needed it yesterday. Then the answer is yes." He assembled his crew over the following week. 4 men he had worked with before. Careful, skilled, the kind of workers who showed up early and didn't need to be told the same thing twice. He called each one personally, offered fair wages, plus a performance share on project completion. Every one of them said yes before he finished the sentence. The first workday was a Thursday. They arrived on site at 6:45. The morning air was cold and smelled like turned clay and concrete dust. Andre walked the site with the project manager for 40 minutes, asking the right questions, making notes in the small notebook he kept in his front pocket. Then he put the notebook away and went to work. He ate a sandwich at the tailgate of his truck at noon. He drove back to the storage unit that evening with dried mud on his boots and a low, steady hum in his chest that he recognized as something close to peace. That night, he slept straight through until 5. He did not celebrate. There was nothing to celebrate yet. There was work, and he had started it. That was enough. Walter was still at the site when Andre came back to sign the first round of work orders just before sundown. The old man stood near the temporary construction office, a white trailer with a plywood ramp, his jacket collar turned up against the November wind, hands in his pockets, watching Andre's crew finish securing the equipment for the night. Andre came up beside him. He held out the signed documents. Walter took them, folded them, slid them into his jacket without looking at them. He put his hand out. Andre shook it. Walter's grip was firm and unhurried, the grip of a man who meant what he was doing. He held it a beat longer than a normal handshake, and looked at Andre directly. "Now we build," he said. Andre nodded once. He walked to his truck, pulled out of the lot, and drove back toward Fairburn Road. The city lights came up slow around him as the sky went dark. He did not look in the rearview mirror at the site. There was nothing back there he needed to see. The meeting was at 8 in the morning. Andre arrived 7 minutes early. His attorney, Marcus Webb, was already at the conference table with a cardboard cup of coffee and a stack of folders. He had the look of a man who had been there since 7. "She's on her way up," Marcus said. Andre set his jacket on the back of the chair and sat down. He did not ask who. The door opened 2 minutes later. She walked in carrying a slim leather briefcase and a yellow legal pad held against her side. The pad was already full. Not with scribbles, but with tight, organized handwriting in blue ink, columns and subcolumns, 3 pages of it visible even from across the table. She set both items down before she introduced herself. "Camille Foster." She extended her hand to Andre first, then Marcus. Her grip was short and firm. "I've reviewed the LLC registration documents and the 4 years of vendor payment records your team pulled. I have questions." She sat down, opened the legal pad to the first page, and looked at Andre directly. "When did you first notice a change in your business account balances?" That was how it started. She worked the way Andre worked, without wasted motion. Over the following 3 weeks, she built the fraud case against Devs LLC the way a contractor builds a load-bearing wall, layer by layer, each piece secured before the next one went on top. She traced every wire transfer through the vendor payment chain. She identified the shell structure Dev had built. A registered LLC pointing to a second holding company, pointing to a third, each layer designed to slow down a casual investigator. She mapped it all on paper, date by date, dollar by dollar, and produced a documentation package that Marcus described, quietly, as airtight. She found 41 separate transactions across 43 months. Total amount moved, $342,800. She presented her findings to Andre and Marcus at the end of the 3rd week. 15 pages of analysis, each claim sourced to a specific document, every document numbered and cross-referenced. She walked through it without rushing, pointing to figures with a capped pen, answering questions before they were fully asked. When she finished, Marcus sat back in his chair and exhaled through his nose. "Dev's attorneys are going to try to challenge your methodology," he said. "They can try," Camille said simply. She closed her folder. "They won't get far." She was right about that. She was usually right about things she said with that particular tone. Not boastful, just accurate. The working dinners started in the 3rd week. The first one was Marcus's idea, a debrief over food since they had been working through lunch for 3 days straight. But Marcus had a conflict and bowed out, and it ended up being just Andre and Camille at a corner table in a quiet restaurant on Northside Drive with case documents spread between the breadbasket and the water glasses. They talked about the case for the first 40 minutes. Then the food came, and without any plan, they talked about other things. She had grown up in Memphis. She had been doing forensic accounting for 11 years. She had built her practice from 2 clients and a home office, and now had a team of 4 and more work than she could take. She said all of this without pride or apology, just fact. He told her about the storage unit, about the crew, about Walter. She listened the way good listeners do, not waiting for her turn to speak, but actually absorbing what he said and responding to the thing he actually meant, not just the words he used. By the end of the meal, the case documents were still there. They had just stopped looking at them. The second dinner was not Marcus's idea. She brought it to him on a Tuesday afternoon, about 6 weeks into the case. She came in and set her briefcase on the conference table without greeting anyone. She pulled out a document set Andre hadn't seen before, thicker than the others, stapled in the corner, stamped with the header of a private lending company based in Savannah. She slid it across to him and sat down. "I found this while I was pulling title records on the house," she said. "It's tied to the property. Your property. The one from the settlement." Andre picked it up. He read slowly. The way he read everything. The language was dense, the kind of dense that was intentional, the kind designed to feel like reading comprehension instead of what it actually was, which was a trap. A private balloon loan, arranged 18 months ago. The house at 4 Alderman Court, the house he had built, pledged as collateral. Patrice's signature on the bottom of page 4. Dev's firm listed as the arranging party. The balloon payment was due in 4 months. The amount due at maturity, $218,000. He read through it twice. Then he set it down and looked at her. "When does it go to auction?" 30 days after default. So, about 5 months from now, if she misses the payment. He nodded slowly. He closed the folder. He said nothing further. But something behind his eyes had already settled. The quiet, certain look of a man who has just identified exactly where the last wire needs to go. The airfield was quiet at 6:45 in the morning. Andre pulled into the lot, cut the engine, and sat for a moment. The sky was pale gray, going gold at the edges. A single ground crew worker moved across the tarmac in the distance, small against the open space. He got out. Camille was already there, standing near the entrance with her briefcase and a coffee, reading something on her phone. She was wearing a charcoal blazer and dark trousers. She looked like she belonged at the meeting they were going to, which was the point. "Morning," she said, without looking up. "Morning." They walked in together. The Cessna was small and clean. 8 seats, leather worn soft with use. Andre stored both bags in the overhead compartment while Camille settled in and opened her laptop. By the time the engine started turning, she had a spreadsheet open and her reading glasses on. He sat across the aisle and looked out the window as the plane taxied. Marcus had called him the previous afternoon. An offhand mention, the kind delivered carefully, because Marcus knew how to deliver things carefully. The investor Dev had been chasing for months. A man named Gerald Pruitt operated out of Atlanta. Pruitt's own legal team had flagged the connection to the fraud case during their due diligence on Dev. And word had traveled the way word travels in legal circles, quietly, efficiently, and without anyone meaning to spread it. Dev was making a last push. A breakfast meeting at the same Atlanta airfield. That morning. Marcus had not told him what to do with the information. Andre had not asked. He was going to Atlanta because Walter had spent 4 months building toward this introduction, and the developer waiting for them was serious money, and the timing was right. That was the whole of it. They were 40 minutes into the flight when Camille looked up from her screen. "Walk me through the site logistics one more time," she said. The second location, the Gwinnett build, I want to understand the sequencing before we're in the room." He walked her through it. She listened and took notes, and asked 2 questions that were better than the ones his own project manager had asked. When he finished, she made a note at the bottom of the page and nodded. "Okay," she said. "I think the presentation is clean." "It is clean." "Then we're ready." She went back to her screen. He looked out the window at the cloud cover breaking apart below them. Georgia was green from up here, wide and open and uncomplicated. He thought about the house on Alderman Court, about the folder, about a Thursday night in late October that felt like it belonged to someone else's life. Then he stopped thinking about it. The plane touched down smooth and rolled toward the terminal. Andre stood when the engines quieted, pulled both bags from the overhead, and handed Camille hers without ceremony. She took it, tucked her laptop under her arm, and moved toward the door. The airfield was more active than the one they had left. 2 other small planes were on the tarmac. A fuel truck moved slowly along the far edge. The morning had warmed up. Bright Georgia sun, the kind that makes everything look sharp and exposed. He came down the steps first. He saw her immediately. Patrice was standing about 40 yards away near a black SUV parked at the edge of the tarmac. She was dressed the way she always dressed for things that mattered to her. Everything considered. Everything intentional. She was talking to a man in a gray suit, who had the relaxed posture of someone with money and the specific kind of patience that comes from never having to rush. Dev was beside her, one hand in his pocket, his other arm gesturing as he spoke. Then Patrice looked up. She saw Andre first. She always did. He watched it happen in real time. The recognition. The recalculation. The thing her face did when her mind caught up to what her eyes were already telling her. That the man standing at the bottom of those steps in a suit that fit like it was made for him, with a woman beside him who looked like she walked out of a meeting she had already won, was the same man she had left in a courthouse parking lot 2 years ago with $12,000 and a work truck. The color left her face like a light being switched off. Her knees went. She went down without a sound. The investor, Gerald Pruitt, turned immediately and moved toward her, hand out, calling for someone. A ground crew member came at a jog. Dev did not move. He stood completely still, staring across the tarmac at Andre, his hand still in his pocket. The performance he had spent the morning constructing, dissolving in real time. His face went through 3 different calculations in about 4 seconds, none of them landing anywhere useful. Andre walked, steady, unhurried, directly toward the terminal entrance. He passed within 15 feet of Dev. He slowed, not stopped, slowed. He turned his head and found Devereaux Holloway's eyes and held them. 1 second, 2, 3, nothing on his face. Nothing that could be named or quoted or used. Just a man looking at another man with complete and total clarity. Then he looked forward and kept walking. Camille fell into step beside him without missing a beat. She did not look toward the SUV. She did not ask anything. She already understood everything she needed to. The terminal doors opened ahead of them, and they walked through. Walter Knox lived in a brick house off Cascade Road that he had owned for 31 years. The kitchen smelled like coffee and old wood, and something that might have been cornbread from earlier in the day. He kept the overhead light off in the evenings and used 2 lamps instead, which made the whole room feel like a place where serious things could be said without the words bouncing off the walls. Andre sat across from him at the kitchen table with a mug in both hands. Walter had not said a word in 4 minutes. He just sat there, coffee cooling in front of him, listening to everything Andre had laid out. The airfield, the moment Patrice's legs gave, Gerald Pruitt rushing over, Dev standing there with his hand still in his pocket, like a man watching his own house burn and forgetting he had legs. When Andre finished, Walter picked up his mug. He took a slow sip. "The investor saw all of it," he said. "All of it." Walter set the mug down and nodded once, the way a man nods when something confirms what he already knew. Dev needed that man. He needed that deal like he needed oxygen. He folded his hands on the table. "That's done now." "It was done before we landed," Andre said. Walter looked at him. A small smile moved across his face just briefly, and then it was gone. "The auction," he said. "Walk me through your number." Andre pulled a folded sheet from his jacket pocket and smoothed it flat on the table. Walter put on his reading glasses and leaned in. They spent the next 40 minutes going through it. The auction floor, the comparable sales on Alderman Court, the structuring of the bid through Knox, Washington, so that the name on the paperwork was the LLC's, not Andre's. His attorney had already drafted the acquisition framework. The capital was there. The commercial contracts had produced exactly the liquidity Walter had told Andre they would, back when Andre had nothing but a storage unit and a handshake to go on. "You want it," Walter said. It was not a question. "It's a sound acquisition," Andre said. "I know the property. I know what it's worth. I know what the foundation looks like because I poured it." Walter considered that. "Marcus can file the bid paperwork Thursday." "That's what I'm thinking." "Then that's what we'll do." The auction was on a Tuesday morning. Andre was on a job site in Gwinnett County when his attorney called. He was standing in the middle of a half-finished commercial corridor, clipboard in hand, listening to one of his crew leads talk through a conduit issue in the East Wing. He held up one finger to the crew lead, stepped away, and answered. Marcus kept it short. Knox, Washington had submitted the winning bid. The property on Alderman Court was now a company asset. "Understood," Andre said. He ended the call, walked back to his crew lead, and looked at the conduit diagram. "Run it along the west wall instead," he said. "Cleaner load path." The crew lead nodded and moved off. Andre kept working. The fraud case moved the way cases move when the paperwork is airtight, and the other side knows it. Slowly at first, then with a gathering weight that Dev's attorneys could feel but not stop. The State Bar grievance had entered a formal review stage. Dev had retained 2 different defense firms in 6 weeks, which told Andre's attorney everything about how those conversations were going behind closed doors. His clients were leaving, not loudly, just quietly redirecting. A real estate group in Buckhead, a property management firm in Decatur, a developer in Sandy Springs who had used Dev for 3 consecutive closings and then simply stopped returning calls. Nobody made a statement. Nobody had to. In professional circles, a man's reputation contracts the way a wound does. Slowly, then all at once. Andre heard about it through Marcus. He did not comment. He filed it away the same way he filed everything. Without drama, without satisfaction, he let himself feel out loud. Patrice called on a Wednesday, then again the following Monday. He watched the phone both times, her name on the screen, the little vibration against the workbench where he'd set it down. He let it go to voicemail both times. She did not leave a message either time, which told him everything about where she was. A woman with leverage leaves a message. A woman without it just calls again. He had things to say to her. He knew exactly what they were. He had known for a while. But the words required a specific setting, the right table, the right room, the right arrangement of silence and light and documented truth. He was not going to have that conversation over the phone. He was not going to have it on her terms, in her timing, in whatever emotional register she arrived at having rehearsed. He picked up his phone and scrolled to a different number. The restaurant on Peachtree. The corner table near the window that the hostess held for him without being asked any more. He made the reservation. Thursday evening, 7 o'clock. Table for 2. Then he called Marcus. "I need you to send her a meeting request," he said. "Tell her I'll explain everything. She'll come." A brief pause on the other end. "I'll send it tonight," Marcus said. "Good." "Andre." Marcus hesitated. "You sure about the timing?" "I've been sure for 2 years." Marcus confirmed it. Andre ended the call. He set the phone face down on the workbench and leaned back in his chair. And for one quiet moment, in the low hum of the construction trailer, he let out a single slow exhale, the smallest, quietest release of a breath he had been holding for a very long time. Patrice arrived 11 minutes early. She chose the chair that faced the door, the one with the better angle, the stronger position. She set her purse down with deliberate care, smoothed the front of her dress, and looked around the room like a woman taking inventory of a space she intended to own. The hostess had already brought water. Patrice did not touch it. She straightened her fork, then her knife, then her fork again. She had been rehearsing for 3 weeks, since the airfield, since she had woken up on that tarmac with Gerald Pruitt's hand under her elbow and the image of Andre in that suit already burning itself into the inside of her skull. She had run through this conversation in the car, in the shower, standing at the kitchen window of a house she now understood she did not fully own. She knew what she was going to say. She knew how she was going to say it. She knew the tone, warm but firm, honest but measured, the voice of a woman who had been wronged in ways that explained, if not excused, her choices. She was ready. At exactly 7 o'clock, Andre walked through the door. He was not dressed to impress. That was the thing that unsettled her first. He was not performing anything. Dark slacks, a clean jacket, no tie. He moved through the restaurant the way he moved through everything, unhurried, like a man who had already accounted for every variable in the room before he stepped into it. The hostess smiled at him with the easy familiarity of someone who had seen him before. She did not lead him to the table. He already knew where it was. He pulled out the chair across from Patrice and sat down. He looked at her once, directly, and then looked at the server who had materialized at his elbow. "Just water," he said. The server left. Andre folded his hands on the table and looked at Patrice again. "Go ahead," he said. She went. She had practiced it, and the practice showed. Not in a way that felt dishonest, but in the way that long-held feelings sound when they have been turned over many times and worn smooth. She talked about the early years, the way Andre would come home and move through the house like a man solving a problem, efficient and present in body, but somewhere else in mind. She talked about the dinners she cooked that went unremarked on, the conversations that ended before they started, the quiet that accumulated between them the way sediment accumulates, slowly, invisibly, until one day you realize you cannot see the bottom. "I felt like a piece of furniture," she said, "like something you'd built and were proud of and didn't need to look at anymore." Andre listened. He did not move. He did not interrupt. He did not arrange his face into anything that could be read as dismissal. When she got to Dev was just trying to protect me. He saw what I couldn't say out loud. He was doing what a brother does. Her voice tightened slightly, a hairline fracture in the composure she was working to maintain. She finished. She looked at him. Andre was quiet for a moment. Then he said, "You weren't wrong about all of it." She blinked. "I wasn't present the way I should have been," he said. "I gave you a house and a stable life, and I thought that was the same as giving you a husband. It wasn't. That's true, and I've known it was true." He said it the same way he said everything. Level, without heat, without asking for anything in return. "I'm not going to pretend otherwise." Patrice opened her mouth, and he continued, "But that's not why we're here." He reached down and lifted a manila folder from the bag beside his chair. He set it on the table and opened it. He turned the first page toward her. "This is the account you opened 3 years into our marriage," he said. $214,000. "I found it the night you told me you wanted a divorce." Her chin rose slightly. He was already turning to the next document. "These are the vendor payment records from my business accounts over 4 years. 41 transactions, every one of them directed to an LLC that doesn't do any actual work. He turned another page. That LLC is registered to a holding company. The registered agent is your brother. The composure did not shatter. It just went very, very still. He kept going. He walked her through each document the way he would walk a client through a wiring schematic, methodically, without emotion, making sure every connection was visible and understood. The balloon loan, the terms she had signed without reading carefully, the payment that had come due, the auction. Then he turned to the last page. "This is the Knox Washington acquisition filing," he said. "My company holds title to the house on Alderman Court." He let that land. "You're living in a house that belongs to my company," he said. "I haven't decided what to do with that yet. But you should know." Patrice stared at the documents spread across the table in front of her. The rehearsed conversation was gone. Every version of it. There was nothing left to reach for. Andre watched her absorb it, the full weight of what she had built and what it had actually built in return. He watched her face move through something she had never had to move through before. He finished his water. He stood. He buttoned his jacket. The check had been paid before he arrived. He walked out of the restaurant without another word. Dev Holloway walked into the deposition room like a man who had done this before, which he had. That was the thing about Dev. He had sat across from opposing counsel in tight rooms with bad lighting, and walked out intact more times than most attorneys managed in a full career. He knew how these rooms worked. He knew the rhythms, the pressure points, the moments where you held firm, and the moments where you gave a little to protect what mattered. He set his leather portfolio on the table. He straightened his cufflinks. He exchanged a brief, practiced word with his attorney. Marcus Webb, one of the sharper civil defense lawyers in the metro area, a man Dev had referred business to twice and was now paying at a rate that made his eyes water every time the invoice arrived. He looked across the table at Andre's legal team. He did not look at Camille Foster. That was a choice, a deliberate one, because Camille Foster was the problem, and looking at the problem directly had not helped him in the 3 months since her forensic report had first landed on his desk. He had read it twice. He had sent it to 2 colleagues for review. Both had called him back with the same silence before they spoke. The kind of silence that means, "I don't know what to tell you." He kept his eyes on Andre's lead counsel. He kept his face composed. The proceeding began. Camille's documentation did not argue. It did not persuade. It simply existed, precise and immovable, the way a load-bearing wall exists, page after page of wire transfer records, shell entity filings, LLC registration documents, and bank reconciliation reports, all organized with a clarity that left no interpretive space. Every transaction, every date, every dollar amount, laid out in sequence like a map of a crime drawn by the person who understood it best. Dev's attorney challenged the methodology twice. The first challenge was procedural, a question about the chain of custody for certain financial records. Camille answered from her seat without notes, without hesitation, citing the specific statute and the specific documentation protocol she had followed. The arbitrator moved on. The second challenge was more aggressive. Webb suggested that Camille's conclusions represented interpretation rather than established fact, that the LLC transactions could reflect legitimate vendor arrangements that had not been adequately investigated. Camille looked at him with the patience of a woman who had already anticipated this question and built the answer into the record 3 exhibits prior. The LLC filed no tax returns in the first 2 operating years, she said. It has no employees on record. It has no physical address beyond a registered agent mailbox, and the services it allegedly invoiced for, specialty electrical consulting, were already being performed by Mr. Washington's own licensed crew, documented in his project logs, which are entered as Exhibit 22. She paused. If the arrangement was legitimate, I'd encourage the defense to produce the work product. We've been waiting on that for 11 weeks. Webb had nothing further. The settlement terms were not negotiated. They were presented, substantiated, and imposed. $340,000 in fraudulently diverted funds. Legal fees. Interest calculated from the date of the first unauthorized transaction. The total figure, when the arbitrator read it into the record, was $418,000 and some change, payable in structured installments, beginning within 30 days. Dev's face did not move when he heard the number, but his jaw tightened just once, in a way that Marcus Webb pretended not to notice. The State Bar censure had been filed separately and concluded the same week. Formal censure, 2-year probationary restriction on his license. He could still practice, technically, but under conditions that would require disclosure to every new client. In his field, in his circles, that disclosure was a slow-motion ending. And then there was Gerald Pruitt. The Atlanta investor had not been in that deposition room. He had not needed to be. In the 3 months since the airfield, since he had watched a composed, elegantly dressed woman crumple to the tarmac, while the man she'd been watching stride off a private aircraft kept walking, Pruitt had made some calls, quiet ones, the kind wealthy men make when they are deciding whether someone is worth the risk. He had concluded that Dev was not. His attorney sent formal written notice that Pruitt would not be pursuing any professional relationship with Devereaux Holloway going forward. 2 sentences. No elaboration. Dev had read that letter standing at his kitchen counter at 7 in the morning. He had put it face down on the granite and not picked it up again. That evening, Andre sat at Walter Knox's kitchen table. Walter had the settlement summary in front of him, his reading glasses low on his nose, his finger tracing the final figures slowly. Then he laughed. It started deep in his chest and rolled out full and unhurried, the laugh of a man with absolutely nothing left to prove, and every reason to feel satisfied. He took his glasses off and set them on the table and laughed a little longer. "Boy," Walter said, shaking his head. "Boy, I knew you were going to be something." Andre looked at him. He let the words settle where they were meant to settle. He did not deflect them or minimize them. He smiled. He nodded once. The parking structure beneath the office building was mostly empty by the time Dev reached his car. His footsteps echoed off the concrete. He stood at the driver's side door for a moment before he opened it, one hand on the roof, looking at nothing. Then he got in and called Patrice. "It's not over," he said. His voice was still working to hold its shape. "They think they've closed this thing, but there are still angles. There are still—" Patrice said nothing. He kept talking. Shorter sentences now, less conviction behind each one. She still said nothing. Then there was a long pause on the line. The kind of pause where both people understand that the conversation has already ended, that they are just waiting for someone to confirm it. She ended the call. Dev sat in the dark of the parking structure with the phone still in his hand. The screen went dim, then dark. Neither of them had anything left to build on. The letter arrived on a Tuesday. Patrice received it through Andre's attorney. Formal, clean, 2 pages. Knox Washington Infrastructure Partners held title to the property at 4814 Sycamore Ridge Drive. The company had elected to sell. She was being offered 60 days to vacate the premises and a relocation payment of $15,000, structured as a full and final settlement of all remaining claims between the parties. There was no preamble, no softness, no cruelty either. Just terms, a deadline for her response, and a signature line. She called Dev first. He did not pick up. She sat with the letter for most of that day. She read it twice in the morning, and once more in the afternoon, as if the words might shift between readings and reveal some angle she had missed. They did not shift. There was no angle. She had built her exit strategy on a foundation she never fully inspected, and the man she had walked away from had been quietly buying the ground beneath it for over a year. Within 48 hours, her attorney sent confirmation. She accepted. The house sold in 30 days. The buyers were a young couple, Marcus and Deja Sutton, mid-30s, 2 kids under 6, the kind of family that tours a house and immediately starts pointing at rooms and saying this could be the playroom before the agent has finished the walkthrough. They had been looking for 8 months. They cried a little at the closing table, which Marcus tried to cover by clearing his throat repeatedly, and which Deja did not bother to cover at all. Andre sat across from them and watched it happen. He had built this house with deliberate hands, the framing, the wiring, every switch and socket planned with the same precision he brought to every job. He knew where every load-bearing wall stood. He knew which outlet in the kitchen had given him trouble, and which window in the upstairs hallway let in the best light on winter mornings. Marcus Sutton shook his hand at the end with both of his own. "We're going to take care of it," Marcus said. He meant it. Andre could hear that he meant it. "I know you will," Andre said. He walked out to his truck. He got in. He pulled out of the parking lot of the title company and onto the main road heading back toward the city. He did not look back at the building as he drove away. The house belonged to someone who needed it now. That was the right outcome. It had always been about building something real. And something real, when it lands in the right hands, keeps being real long after you have moved on from it. He turned on the radio and headed home. 14 months passed the way good months do. Full, purposeful, and faster than expected. Knox Washington Infrastructure Partners completed its second major commercial contract in the spring. A distribution facility outside Decatur, 6 figures in electrical and infrastructure work, finished 11 days ahead of schedule. The third contract, a retail and mixed-use development with a developer out of Charlotte, was in active negotiation, and the numbers on that one were bigger than anything Andre had touched before. Walter Knox tracked every development from his kitchen table, reading glasses on, yellow legal pad nearby, asking the right questions at the right moments. But he was moving slower now. His doctor had said the word manageable, which is the word doctors use when they want to be honest, without alarming you. Walter understood what manageable meant. He was 67 years old and had been working since he was 16. And there were mornings now when the body had opinions about what the day was going to look like. He had already begun the formal process. The paperwork to transfer majority ownership of Knox Washington to Andre was moving through its final stages. The company, conservatively valued by 2 independent firms, sat at $4.2 million. Walter had shown Andre the valuation report on a Wednesday evening, set it on the table between their coffee cups, and tapped it once with his finger. Andre had looked at the number for a long moment. "You built this too," Andre said. "You know that. I provided the soil," Walter said. "You did the growing." The engagement had been announced at dinner. Walter's house, Camille's mother, and her sister at the table. No spectacle. Andre had not made a speech. He had simply put the ring on the table in front of Camille after the meal, and she had looked at it, and then looked at him, and said yes in the same quiet, certain way she said everything that mattered. Her mother had cried. Walter had raised his glass. Her sister had immediately started asking about venues, which made Camille laugh for the first time all evening with complete abandon. The plane was a Cessna Citation CJ-3, purchased through Knox Washington as an operational asset. The Charlotte negotiations alone had justified it on paper, and the math would keep justifying it. It sat on the tarmac of the regional airport, 12 minutes from Andre's house, on a Thursday morning in early fall, fueled and ready. The Charlotte developer meeting was on the calendar. Camille was beside him, her carry-on in hand, already reviewing notes on her tablet as they crossed the tarmac. Walter stood near the hangar, hands in his jacket pockets, watching them approach the plane. He had driven out, specifically. He had not said so, but Andre understood why. Andre gripped his hand before boarding. Walter held it a beat longer than necessary and nodded once, the kind of nod that carries the full weight of 2 decades without needing a single word to support it. Andre and Camille boarded. The attendant secured the door behind them, and then Andre paused at the top of the air stairs just before stepping inside. He turned and looked out over the airfield. The morning light was low and clean, laying gold across the tarmac. His city stretched out beyond the fence line, the skyline he had wired buildings into, the neighborhoods he had worked in since he was 23 years old, with calloused hands and a truck that burned oil. His runway. His life. He did not think about Patrice. He did not think about Dev. He did not reach for the satisfaction of their diminishment, because that was not what filled him in this moment. What filled him was something quieter and more complete than that. He had known, through all of it, through the dark kitchen and the photographs on his phone, and the courthouse and the storage unit, and the long months of building in silence. He had known exactly who he was. He had never needed anyone else to confirm it. But the world had confirmed it anyway. He had built the proof, with his own hands, in his own time, on a foundation no one had thought to look for. He allowed himself this moment, private, unperformed, completely his. Then he stepped inside. The door closed, the engines rose, the plane lifted. The underestimated man is airborne. He has been for a while now. I hope you enjoyed that one. Be sure to like the video and subscribe so you don't miss the next story. I've picked out 2 more for you that I think you'll really like.